Welcome, Immigrant Nation. Another week, another new episode. This is your host, Aaron Deliosa, and this is an Immigrant's Life podcast. An Immigrant's Life podcast on all the social media where you can send a message if you want to reach us, or if you or someone you know wants to come on the podcast. That's the best way to reach us. You can also email us at animigrantslife@yahoo.com. Today's guest is a journalist and an Edward R. Murrow Award winner, whose journey into this field was anything but typical. Growing up with limited parental guidance and grappling with imposter syndrome, her story reflects the struggles many face when seeking their voice. Her experiences in both diverse and less diverse communities fueled her passion for representation, leading her to impactful work with MANA, a storytelling organization where they uplift Filipino voices and drives meaningful changes. Join us as we celebrate our guest's inspiring journey and delve into the vital role of representation and community support. With that, without further ado, let's get into the show. Isa, dalawa, tatlo. Today's guest is an award-winning journalist. She amplifies underrepresented voices through her projects that allows them to shine just like her sweet smile. Everyone, please welcome Shayne Nuesca. How you doing, Shayne?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am excellent. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. Cool people only, you know?
Oh,
That's the rule.
I like when people say I'm cool.
Yo, you don't think you're cool?
I'm working on it. I'm working on being cool.
Oh, boy. Why do you think you're not cool?
I feel like I just go through life and it's all just vibes and I don't know. I do a lot of, I think my day-to-days, I don't know, people may not think it's mundane, but for me, there's a lot of mundanity in my life. So, yeah.
Yeah, but your mundane is cool.
Is it? Oh, well, yeah.
You know what I mean?
You know, I get to do some, I'm really privileged to get to do the work that I do. But then outside of that, I think I'm just like I'm normal, like nothing super cool happening. Yeah.
Yeah. There's this quote that I always repeat. I don't know if I stole it from someone or I came up with it. I'm pretty sure I stole it from someone. That there's beauty in the mundane.
I've heard that. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to appreciate that a lot more because I think life gets, at least work life gets really busy. And so you kind of crave that mundanity.
Yeah, you know, like isn't that what we want? Peace?
Yes.
And that's what peace does.
Yes.
Like it's really mundane.
Yeah, I guess that's cool. I have a lot of peace in my life, so that's cool. Yeah.
Amazing. Before we get into all the chismes, why don't you tell the Immigrant Nation where they can reach you or if you want to promote anything?
Well, I am based in Alaska, and fairly recently, I co-founded a media collective called MANA, where we document the history of Filipino Americans in Alaska, which is not as widely known as other diaspora, I guess you could say. You could check out some of our stories on manaalaska.com or on our Instagram, which is at mana.alaska.
For sure. Mana, we have some English listeners, so we have to explain what mana means.
Mana in Tagalog. I'm gonna get this translation right. Because there's a lot of words in our language that's like hard to really grasp the meaning, but I think the best meaning is something that you inherit, but it's also something that you can pass down. And so we kind of use those two meanings interchangeably in our work, and how that specific word, how mana, guides how we approach our creative decisions, if you will, in our work.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and it's not just monetarily, or it's not just a material. You can actually, there's actually saying in
Mm-hmm.
Tagalog like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, mana ka sa nanay mo," means
Yeah,
like,
like you're
"Oh,
just like your
you
mom. Yeah.
exactly,"
Yeah.
which is a beautiful. I love it. Why is it
Mm-hmm.
important to you to record and to record these stories and share it?
Specifically looking at it with the Alaska lens, there's really not that much about Filipinos in Alaska except one book by Thelma Buckholt. And so we really see our work as standing on her shoulders and her legacy and the foundations that she built and left behind. Um, a lot of the folks on our team, well, all of us actually have um, a background in media and in communications, and in the spaces that we were working in, there weren't a lot of opportunities for us to really bring our stories to light unless we brought them forward. And many times, even when we brought those stories forward, they would be told in a lens that wasn't authentic to, the Filipino culture and the Filipino way of going about things. And so that's what, yeah, that's how we've changed our approach.
What do you mean by that when you said not authentic way?
It's always, I mean, to be completely frank, we live in a world where things are done specifically in media, and we've kind of seen a reckoning these recent years in it. But a lot is done through a white lens. A lot is done through romanticizing history when there's so many nuances to why things came to be. And also, working in journalism, um, there is always sort of this kind of idea that we have to put information out as quickly as possible. And, there are day turns and deadlines. And, Filipinos, we like to take our time, right? Like we got to build our relationships. You're not going to get somebody to talk about their entire life unless it's me, for the first time you meet them. You really got to put in the work to build and sustain that relationship and really cultivate community, so you get um, really deep and nuanced storytelling.
I understand that most of your people that you interview, their lolas, their grandmas. How
Mhm.
do you make them talk? Because these people, they don't talk.
Yeah, I think, for full transparency, I wasn't part of the interviews. And so this might be one of those questions that's like difficult for me to answer. You might have to cut through. But generally, that we, let me run that back. Generally, our approach is, we make these connections and we do something simple like share a meal, or just, talk to them in a space that they're comfortable in. And then just let them really just let them talk, and we'll eat, we'll drink tea, we'll um, kind of go all different directions with that conversation. And then from there, you pick up little things, little pieces of information that they share with you, and then you bring that to the interview whenever they're ready. And part of our process too is making sure that um, uh, we're we're transparent and letting them know, like, hey, like this is going to be published. This is going to be and in the case of last year, it was part of a museum exhibit. Like, feel free to tell us as much or as little as you want. And so a lot of it really is relationship building, and you open up more. I mean, that's just like human nature, right? Like that's just how it is. The closer you feel to somebody, and the more authentic that relationship feels, the more you're willing to open up, right? And the safe, because you feel safe. Um, and in journalism, there's this term called parachute journalism, of people just coming in and they go into a community, they have their interviews, they take what they want, and then they never come back, they never follow through, or they never follow up. And so for us, it's really about that follow up, right? Like one of our colleagues, he's been invited to like birthday parties, like things happening in the community, and we always make sure to show up if we can. And then if we can't, we tell them, we'll be there next time, and we show up the next time. Like we follow through on those promises that we make.
You have to show up, man, or else
Yeah.
they're gonna get mad
Yeah.
at you, and you have to
Hmm.
eat and bring the baon with you when you're leaving.
Yeah.
You know, um, were you born in Alaska?
No, so I was born in San Fernando City in La Union. So I'm Ilocana. My family moved to Alaska in the 70s, I believe. But prior to that, they were in California. Um, and then I guess the generation before them, my family history is kind of um, interesting because there was a break in sort of the wave of family members coming into the United States during World War II and like that period. Um, and so like, my great grandfather had been a farm worker in the Central Valley, or I believe he worked in the canneries, one of those in the Central Valley in California. And then there's really not that much information about him, but the next documented history I could find was my aunt, who had moved to LA. She moved there, I believe, to work for a distant relative of ours. And then from there, she moved to San Francisco, met her husband, my uncle, and then they moved to Alaska at a time where the economy wasn't as great in California, and so they really moved up to Alaska for jobs. And then in the 70s and 80s, they settled first in Dutch Harbor, which if you look at Alaska on the map, Dutch Harbor is in that chain of islands. It's on an island called Unalaska. Um, but it's on the chain of islands that is kind of facing Asia. So they're on that part of the southwest part of Alaska. And then they moved to Anchorage, which is where I grew up, and then started bringing over my grandma, my dad, and all his siblings. And I came into the picture when I was 6 years old. So that was 1996. Yeah. So that was just a brief history.
96 when you moved to Alaska.
Yeah.
By the way, I have to say this.
Yeah.
My uncle, who's a army soldier in the Philippines, went to Alaska, went to Anchorage, like I don't know when, but and as you know, the Philippine government is amazing for taking care of their people. They brought, I think they're like five guys. They're like elite of the elite. They were chosen to go to Alaska to train with the U.S. soldiers, and the Philippine government didn't give them money at all,
Wow.
and they didn't have jackets.
Wow.
That they didn't have nothing, right? And the Filipino community took care of them. I have a picture. I have to send it to you and ask you, like,
Yeah.
do you
I
know
would
these
love to
people?
see that.
Because he said I met a lot of people there, and there's not much Filipinos, and there were kids there. I took pictures of kids, and I probably well, the picture that I have, I'm sure he has one, but the picture I have, it doesn't have kids, but there are people. There are Filipinos,
Yeah.
so
Do
they
you
took care of
know
them.
do you know when they came to Anchorage?
I was here in Canada by then, so I'm not gonna guess because I really don't know. But I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
send
yeah.
you the picture later after the
Wonderful.
conversation.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah. Please
excited
send it
when
to
I'm
me.
like, yes, of course. Anyway, so whoever those people are, shout out because they took care of my uncle and and all that stuff. I understand that you went to Syracuse University to study for your master's.
Yeah, but that was a fully like online program. So I don't really have don't have actual experiences at Syracuse aside from And it wasn't even at Syracuse. It was the Iowa caucuses. We went to this immersion program. And at the time, it was actually 2020 that this happened, but it was during all the presidential campaigns that were happening in Iowa. And we went to a town hall for now President Joe Biden. So we met him because he's a Syracuse alumni. Um, and yeah, it was a really interesting experience because I met him random. It was like we didn't know it was happening, and then they put us on a bus, and they're like, we knew we were gonna go to the Biden town hall, but we didn't really exactly know what we were gonna do there. We thought we were just gonna stand and like watch him speak and all that, but no, we were actually gonna meet him. So they put us on this bus, and we drive to this elementary school and they usher us like his team like has us hurry and they usher us to a kindergarten classroom, but he wasn't quite ready to meet us yet, and so we're all kind of sitting there waiting for about an hour sitting on those like tiny chairs for tiny people. And then he finally comes in and we just kind of banter with a presidential candidate who won that election. So yeah, it's very, yeah, but that's my only sort of grad school experience because after that, the world shut down and, there weren't any more immersion experiences. And I think we were the only cohort of that program that didn't do an immersion at the actual Syracuse campus. But even though with, everything that happened that year, I think going through that program was so essential and really uh, gave me the tools I needed to kind of approach these ventures. I didn't really know was going to happen after grad school. I thought I could just, apply it to my journalism career. At that point, apply what I learned from that program to my journalism. Um, but yeah, I think that year was such a crucial year for me. Um, After that program, I and our gosh, it's just gonna make me go. I know you said you're chismoso, so um, yeah. So after that, after the world shut down, I was actually working for a local TV station. It was a CBS affiliate at that time. And so
In
we were doing
Alaska?
all of, yeah, in Alaska.
Okay.
So we were doing all of these live streams and updates of all the pandemic and all of that. And we were actually working remotely. And so I was producing these live streams in our spare bedroom. And and it was, one day I don't know why I woke up that day and it just felt kind of like ominous. Like there was this weird presence. I like have like this weird, I don't know, like sixth sense, Filipinos. Yeah. So, and then the whole entire newsroom ended up getting laid off in the middle of a pandemic. Um, and so I really took that time. Um, Not only did I try to tap into my network and see who needed someone to work for them, but um, I really took that time to kind of recenter and try to figure out, okay, what type of work do I really want to do? And, is journalism, digital journalism, kind of um, doing the daily news stuff, is that what's going to feed my soul? Because I know it feeds my family, right? Like I'm able to kind of make a living off of that. But I think that whole experience kind of planted the seed for what would become eventually all of the different initiatives that I would um, embark on to, bring representation to Filipinos and Asian Americans and kind of do work that aligns with, what I believe in and what I find important. And that's really amplifying historically marginalized people and giving us a seat at the table because they're not going to put it there, so might as well build a chair and have a sit right at the head of the table. So
And squeeze in.
yeah, squeeze in.
I love it, man. You got the chutzpah, like I need to do something here.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that feeding family or
Hmm.
versus feeding your soul.
Hmm.
I feel like that's a very Western view because in the
Hmm.
Philippines that does not exist.
No, you're feeding your family.
You got to feed your family
Yeah.
first.
Hmm.
I mean, yes, there are some outliers that does it. Most of them are rich already, so there's no
Yeah.
privilege. But when you did you have a problem deciding which one feed your soul and which one feed your family?
I had to choose both. I mean, but for I had to choose feed my family first, of course. Um, but I still in the back of my mind was always trying to feed my soul. Now, in hindsight, looking back, because I didn't initially set out to do journalism. I was kind of told like, "Hey, you're good at this. You should do it." And I was like, "Am I?" So um, yeah, because at first, I had been working in communications in the higher education space. And then someone had randomly noticed my work, someone who ended up being like a really good friend and a mentor and my boss, had noticed my work in the higher ed space and was like, "Hey, do you think you can do that for news?" And I was like, "I don't know, maybe." So yeah, and so that was like the first sort of, I guess, instance of feeding my soul. Because I had gone through a journalism and communications program, was told that journalism, like I'm pretty good at it, but then ended up going to the communications track. And so, but always in the back of my mind was like, what if I did do it? Like, what if I did go out and work in journalism or continued that path? Um, and so I saw that message or that person reaching out to me as a sign that, hey, maybe you should try it. Like, here's your chance. So that was a first instance of, I guess, feeding my soul. Um, yeah. And then from there, it's kind of turned into this domino effect of just going into media and then seeing all the parts of media, seeing parts of the industry I liked and I didn't like, and what I didn't like, I really didn't like. And then taking all of that as motivation to kind of approach things differently and do things my own way.
I guess that person's right. I mean, you won the award, Ed, Edward Murrow. That's not so bad.
Thank you.
How does that feel to win an award? And you're like, I barely not wasn't sure to do this, and then I'm getting this prestigious award.
I think um, when that came down, I don't know that uh, I really gave myself credit. I'm trying to do better at,
Here we go.
kind of hyping myself up, but um yeah, I mean, I look at that now and in hindsight, like we did a lot in that small team. There were only four of us. And I the digital team, and I don't know if there are journalists who listen to this podcast, but if there are, you know that the digital desk doesn't get a lot of respect for the work that they put in and day out. And so for us as a team to get an award, an award that has my name on it, and all these other folks who put in this work that are sometimes or a lot of times invisible in the newsroom. It was really validating, and so I felt like I was in the right place. Yeah, and I felt like it validated that leap of faith that I took. Um, yeah, that happened within the year of me switching to journalism. So yeah, so it was definitely a validating experience, I will say.
That's beautiful. Did you feel that it gave you credibility, or you, from the beginning, you're like, I don't care, I'm good?
don't know. I guess it just, you know, awards are awards, right? But it's like I don't know if it's because I don't know. I have some sort a little bit of like imposter syndrome still talking about it or talking about like any award that yeah, that I've been lucky enough to to earn or to receive. Um yeah, I don't know. I think now I try to um see all of that as validation for the work that I put in, day out. Um, but I don't know about like credibility. I don't know if it, I mean, because you never want to be too proud, but also I'm trying to learn to not be too humble because I think too, you gotta sing your own praises sometimes.
Amen. Amen.
So yeah, I'm still working on it. Still
It's
working on
okay.
it.
It's okay. It takes time. It's confidence. I
Hmm.
call it confidence. It's not, patting yourself on the back is confidence. Saying, "Hey, by the way, did you know I won an award?" That is just get out of here.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah. See, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna walk into a room and be like, "Hey, what's up? My name is
you're holding
award-winning Shayne
you're
Nuesca. I'm
holding the
working."
award like, "Hey,
Yeah. No, no,
hey, what's up?"
no.
No,
No.
like I understand what you're saying like about getting the award. Like it didn't change anything. You know, going like I guess I'm patting myself on the back. But when I won the award too back in 22, it did not change anything for me. This is my work. No matter what happens, I'm gonna follow that course, right?
Hmm.
But also, it's a fact that you won an award. You cannot deny that. It's a fact.
Hmm.
Yes, obviously, don't be like, "Hey, what's up? I'm an award winner." But also, you can say like, "Oh yeah, I won an award." If somebody asks, you
Hmm.
know, that's what my approach with it. Imposter syndrome is a big thing with children of immigrants, specifically. For you, where do you think that where the root for you of that imposter syndrome?
Oh gosh. Oh, we're getting that deep. Holy cow. Um, I have I mm, so I'm the oldest of four
Oh,
siblings,
that's
right?
right
That's
there.
a lot to
Ate.
unpack, right? So that might be it. That's probably where it comes from, right? Because and also, I grew up as a latchkey kid. So my parents were always working, and you really don't hear like, "Oh, you're doing so good." Like you don't hear affirmations because your parents are working. You're the only one who really sees what you're doing all the time for your siblings, what you're doing in school, all of that. Like you're kind of in charge of yourself from a really young age. And so there are a lot of things I really didn't like. I didn't know what I was good at. I didn't really know. Um, yeah, I I will just attribute my imposter syndrome to kind of maybe like the lack of affection and also the lack of affirmation. And that isn't really to the fault of my parents. They were just trying to survive. Um, and so when you're watching out for other people, you don't really do that for yourself. Um,
Yeah. I
so
mean, they came from a culture that no one does that at all. And
yeah.
then when they came to Alaska, they have to survive, and then
Hmm.
they got mouths to feed. They
Yeah.
don't have time to. They don't have the privilege to grow and learn those traits.
Hmm.
Now,
Hmm.
us has the privilege of learning those traits.
Hmm.
I feel like obviously I don't know if you do, but I for me like I can't blame my parents. They were drowning and trying
Hmm.
to survive, and while saving me as well.
Hmm.
So they didn't really have time, right?
Yeah.
But so yeah, I mean, What's your relationship with your parents now? Are you cool with it or?
We're cool. I mean, it's definitely taken a lot of time, right? And I think it's changed a lot since, I have kids and the dynamic changes also.
Oh, you have kids?
Yeah, so,
Oh,
they become grandparents and suddenly I saw them become totally different people. And so I feel like they pour everything into my kids that they couldn't do for their own, which, I'm grateful for. And like if I couldn't have that same relationship with my parents, at least my kids could feel that. So I think we've come to a place of understanding and really uh, kind of knowing our differences. And, that isn't to say that we agree all the time now. I don't think it's hard to ever get to that space with your parents, but I think I understand, why my parents think a certain way or they approach things a certain way. And I, give them a lot of grace, but not like in a resentful way, in a way that from a place that comes from understanding and knowing that culturally we we grew up differently, like we've been molded differently. Yeah, yeah.
do you remember a moment when they were trying to impose their values and culture that they learned from back home and what the culture, and then you being growing up as in America essentially different value, different culture, and you try to tell them like, no, that's not how I'm gonna raise my kids.
Not directly, I would say. I think definitely the whole latchkey thing, not really having my parents around, I think that has influenced me. Like, I feel like I need to be involved. I have to be at all the school performances. I have to be a chaperone at a field trip. I always wished my parents could have done those things for me. And I was always looking for them in the crowd, or
Oh,
I'd always wished my mom
buddy.
would be like one of the moms who could chaperone, but she couldn't, right? Like they couldn't do that stuff because that, sacrifice putting food on the table. So yeah, so I guess indirectly, that's how they influenced me. It's just to be there physically for my kids. And not to say, that they weren't there for me because, they provided. My parents were amazing providers, and they, my dad is the only one of his siblings other than my aunt who brought him over to own a house, right? Like
Wow.
they put in 3 years after we all immigrated, my parents were able to buy a house. Like that is, that's like impossible now, I feel
Three
like. But back
years?
then, yeah, it took them
That's
3 years.
amazing.
And that, I'd never known my dad to not work more than one job until, he got a little bit older and he was like, I can only do one job. But, all my life he had worked multiple jobs, my mom as well. And, they were there for us in their own way. So yeah, but for me, it's important for me to be present, and not just be there, as a provider, but also be there, as counsel, as, someone you can go to actually talk about school. Like we never really talked about school. All they knew was I made good grades. That was it. That was it, right? So, and then also I had a thought like about the imposter syndrome. I also feel too that it kind of for me might stem from, the fact that, I didn't set out to do journalism. And on top of that, I was a non-traditional student too in my program. I was older. I had come from working full time at a state government position, and I was like, I can't do this all my life. I can't be in a cubicle all my life. And so I just went back to school and kind of I did all of my courses in 18 months, and I was my cohort or the folks I graduated with were a lot younger than me. It was, I was always trying to kind of prove myself in that space, in spaces where I was different. And I think too, I mean, like growing up as an immigrant kid, you're always different. And then and then that pattern continues because you're always going to be different in some way. And so for me, it was like, oh, I'm different in all these ways. And so I'm not as talented, not as great as all these other people I get to be around. Yeah, because they've been like, this is their sort of bread and butter. Like, this is what they wanted to do. But me, I'm just kind of like, oh, I ended up here. Oh, it looks like I'm good at this. Oh, okay. I'll stay. So,
That's
yeah,
funny.
yeah.
You touch on it a little bit, but I would like to. Uh, I want to talk about it more. Growing up in Alaska, how was it? Like, were you the only Filipina in the class, or?
You know, so I grew up in Anchorage, and it's been hailed as one, if not the most diverse school district in in the US. But my experiences were, I kind of experienced both. So when we first moved to Alaska, we lived in a neighborhood called Spinard, and I got to go to a school that was pretty diverse. We had a lot of Latino students. I lived in an apartment complex that had a lot of Filipino families, and these were all immigrant families, and so um, I never like it just felt like home in a sense. Added on to my exposure to new cultures or cultures that were new to me. So that living in Spinard, living in the west side of Anchorage, I was exposed to a lot of that diversity that we like to uh, really be proud of here in Anchorage. And then we moved, I said my parents bought that house 3 years after. We moved to still sort of West Anchorage, but closer to South Anchorage. And South Anchorage is a lot less diverse. The schools are a lot less diverse. And I was exposed less to other Filipino kids, even though, I mean, the neighborhood, the street I grew up on was nicknamed Little Manila, but I will say there was only like 5 or 6 Filipino families, and we all kind of lived
And that's Little
next
Manila.
to each other. So I guess it
Wait,
was
wait.
Little
How
Manila
many
for,
street? How many in the street? How many houses are there?
oh, I don't know, probably just like a couple dozen. So it doesn't
Okay.
even count, I feel
Yeah,
like.
I guess so.
Yeah. So, um, yeah. So, and then going to high school, I was exposed. There weren't as many Filipino Americans, I would say, or um, it was more so the Filipino American kids that I was around, they were like second generation, and I've always felt pretty in between. So I couldn't relate to them as much as I could relate to their parents, if you will. So yeah. Um, I guess to answer your question, it's, I was exposed, but also in a sense alienated. If you ever visit Anchorage, you'll realize that there are so many Filipino American groups and organizations. And I always felt like a lot of those groups, they do amazing work in the community, but um, it is really alienating for kids like me whose parents don't have the time to volunteer with those organizations or bring us to all of the cultural events because they're working and all of the different circumstances. So it's really hard for kids in between generations, um, I think, to integrate in that way because their parents aren't as established, or they're still kind of finding their footing in the States.
For sure. Have you always been close to the culture?
It's interesting. I would say, um, I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten closer. But growing up, it's not like it was completely shut out. Like I didn't do a lot of the, I guess, traditional sort of keeping in touch with your culture. I didn't, I wasn't part of like a Filipino dance organization or anything. I did a Filipino dance for summer school once, and that was it. But culturally, I still speak the language, or the languages. Um, still exposed to Filipino media. We still keep in touch or keep tabs on what's happening back home in the Philippines. Both on like the national level and like at home in the barangay. Like
Ugh.
we know what's happening. So staying in touch with the culture in that sense. Yeah.
The chismis is the best. I'm not
Yeah.
joking. I mean, I love it. I love that. So, like my aunt, I think she's still in the Philippines to visit, right? My aunt is here. My mom is here. So two aunts and then my mom, right? One other aunt got somehow rushed to the hospital for something. The one in the Philippines found out before the one in Canada found
That's
out.
hilarious.
I'm like, that is crazy. I'm sure that happens to your family too.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that is we call that, so in Mana we call it the Tita Grapevine. Because really that's sometimes how we find the people we talk to. So it's like, people just telling us, "Oh, I heard so and so. Yeah, like you should go talk to him." And I believe that is how we found at least one elder that we spoke with. So,
How do you choose the guest, or the people that you're gonna profile?
it's for the most part, it's really organic. We work with community organizations, our partners, and they are most in tune to their communities or in touch with their communities, and they give us ideas on who to talk to. But of course, once we get to those communities, everyone wants to talk to you. And so you learn about all about different people. And then you kind of make the list in your head. Okay, like, okay, I'm gonna talk to this tita. And then next week I'll talk to this lolo, give him a phone call or something. So yeah, it's all pretty organic.
I love it. I love it. Do you guys try to look for the one that you guys feel that will talk more, or you just try anyway?
Not really. We do kind of approach it from the lens like, okay, who is somebody that has who can share a lot of history and context around that history that no one is going to talk to or no one has tried to approach, which is challenging. It's a challenge, right? But, we aren't going to get a full picture of history if we keep talking to the same people that others have already talked to, right?
Yeah.
We need to talk to people whose stories have gone really unheard, but provide us with so much knowledge and context to where we come from as a community.
Yeah. I see that 100%. What's the most rewarding part of being involved with Mana?
I think so. We talked about it being, kind of something you pass down. I love, and we're only in our second year, and so the first year there's so much energy around it, but what I love seeing the most were the next generation, the younger kids, all the students who were, part of our event, who went and saw the exhibit. The folks that we talked to at the different community, the younger folks that we talked to at the different community events. It's so great to see um, people, specifically younger people, just interested in knowing more about our collective history and really being secure and celebrating their history and their culture and not being afraid to be outspoken about being Filipino. There's that colonial mentality where you don't want to be too Filipino, right? Because you don't want to, you want to assimilate as much as possible. And um, I think for a while, especially, when I was younger, I really wasn't as proud to be Filipino. Um, but to see kids who are fully secure in their Filipino identity and are able to express it so freely, um, yeah, I think that is really great to see. Yeah, it's kind of like a, a healing experience, if you will, because it's like, oh, like if in another universe, there is 13 or 14-year-old Shayne and she is part of a Filipino club. So
Doing some
yeah.
tinikling and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do love it. I do love that, kids are like, yeah, I'm Filipino, and they'll post it on Instagram or whatever else, and they'll be proud of it. Some of them, they uses it for the clout.
Oh yeah. Oh
But
my gosh.
still,
We
at
can
least,
do a whole episode on Filipino baiting, but
oh my God. You know what drives me nuts? Is, those white people that goes to the Philippines and they're like,
Mm.
hey guys, it's amazing here. They're so kind and whatnot. I'm like,
To you.
because you're white and they think you have money.
Oh gosh.
Oh, it drives me
Yeah, that's a whole thing.
oh, I know. Like I
That's a
sometimes I
whole
get into
thing.
Instagram like the black hole of that. I'm like, pisses me off, like insane. Like, anyways, we need to move on because I'm gonna get mad again. What's the ultimate goal of Mana? Of course, documenting all these stories and whatnot. But what's the ultimate goal?
Oh, I don't know if I want to. I can't. I won't. I don't want to speak for the whole group. And I don't want to speak for. Um, I mean, for me, like the work that, putting together these stories and even outside of Mana, like approaching storytelling in a different way and sharing how we can create community-based storytelling and storytelling that's really authentic to the culture of the people that you're documenting. Like I hope, and this is my ultimate goal for me personally, I hope that it changes the way um, journalists approach marginalized communities and really understand that in order to get uh, a good story, and a good story is nuance, a good story just doesn't celebrate the high points of a community, right? It also is very honest and talks about, the the pitfalls of that community and the sort of um, what's needed for liberation of that community. And you can't do that if you fly in and you show up and then you get your tape and then you go and then you never come back. Like I want um, I want more journalists to really take time with their stories, take time with relationships, and really be in community uh, when they're telling these stories. Um, yeah, because and also like one of my ultimate goals too is to um, bring more visibility, of course, to Filipino Americans, bring more visibility to historically marginalized people, and uh, kind of use that to empower the next generation. Because I think when you see yourself represented in media and the books you read, the shows that you watch, you get a sense of what's possible, right? Like seeing the Filipinos in Alaska book for me, um, like I thought, okay, like this is something that I could do. Um, Seeing people like I'm gonna name one of my mentors right now, but and she actually ended up being one of my journalism professors. But seeing somebody like Joy Chavez Mapai for me, she was um, a TV reporter for the NBC affiliate here in Anchorage. And I saw her on the Channel 2 news every night doing her reporting from the newsroom. And I was like, oh, that's a Filipino name. That's a Filipino face. And, of course, again, like I never thought I'd be in journalism, but like to be able to see her. And then in one of my first journalism classes, she's the professor. Like, it kind of clicked for me like, oh, like, yeah, this is possible. Like, I can be in communications, I can be in media because she's done it. So when you see yourself represented in these spaces, it's empowering. And I want the next generation to feel that empowerment. So I guess at the end, it's, yeah, empowering journalists to be better journalists and the next generation to just see the possibilities and be whatever they want to be, which I know it sounds cliche, but
They're cliche for a reason.
yeah.
Yeah. I love that goal. It's beautiful. Did you guys receive any reluctance from the community
Oh
about?
no, no. I mean, of course, like for me, I was always nervous. Like I'm always nervous around older Filipino folks in general, but once they heard that we were doing this, I think they were just excited. It was almost like they were waiting. They had been waiting for a while to do this kind of stuff. And I should preface too, like before Mana, I had already been working sort of to bring Filipino American stories to Alaska media. I was working at a public radio um, station, and I kind of put the beginning pieces of what it eventually my other colleague at Mana ended up picking up and like transformed and evolved into like this beautiful, beautiful project that like I would have never envisioned starting out. But so had always been kind of working in that space and figuring out, okay, how do we get more Filipinos talking about this stuff? So I think Mana as the culmination of a lot of us doing this work independently for so long and then finally coming together. It's kind of like our super, I don't know, like if you had a superhero that had multiple powers, but like combined into one, like a Gundam. It's basically like it's turned into this Gundam of like different folks who are really good at different parts of the storytelling and media process.
I love
And
it.
yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah, super honored.
How do you get? Do you guys get funding from the government? How do you guys keep going?
How do we get funding? A lot of it actually in the beginning was, we put in our own money. And for the first exhibit, we received donations from a lot of the Filipino American organizations. Again, like I felt like It felt like they had been waiting for something like this for a really long time.
That's beautiful.
So yeah, and then now we're kind of we're figuring out that piece. So and also that's really not in my purview at the moment. So
That's
yeah, I
okay.
think yeah, yeah. I don't know if I don't think that was the best answer to that question.
It
So
was an
probably not.
answer, and that's
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what are the future projects that you could talk about? Obviously, that you're excited about.
So this Filipino American History Month, that's October. We are going to be down in Ketchikan, Alaska, which is in the southeast region of the state. And it's one of the oldest Filipino American settlements, I think, in Alaska. So we're going to be talking to some folks down there and showing parts of our exhibit. And then simultaneously, we're also going to be showing our exhibit, parts of our exhibit in Fairbanks, Alaska. So those are the two things that we have lined up this year.
That's awesome. Excited, excited. Listen, Shane, I think we're there. I really do
Hmm.
appreciate your time and your openness to answer my silly questions and whatnot. But
Yeah.
before we close out, do you have anything to impart us with or anything you'd like to say, whatever you want?
No, I think I'm good. I mean, I don't know. I think um back to I think the ultimate goal. Um I think uh with my work individually and folded into that mana, um I think my ultimate goal would be that communities see this work and are inspired and empowered to do the same work for their communities because there's so many stories out there that we don't know and we're going to lose. We only have our elders for so long, so we only have that history for so long. So yeah,
Beautiful. Again, Shane, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
thank you for having me.
Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Again, Shane, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, listeners, for listening. This is Aaron Del Yosa for An Immigrant's Life. I'll see you guys later.